Let the show begin. Right on. Hi, everybody. Just admitting people in real slowly. Just wanted to, I guess I can start off already. Well, aloha and welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us for this June edition for our NDPTC Third Thursday webinar series. My name is Wayson Josue, and I'll be your facilitator for today's session. I usually support these webinars behind the scenes. Amy Kitchener is usually the one who facilitates on behalf of NDPTC. So I appreciate your patience and support as I step in to guest host today's session. I also wanted to quickly acknowledge that today is Juneteenth, so we really appreciate you folks taking time out of your busy schedules to spend some time with us and hear our wonderful presentation that we have today. Today's presentation is Federating Emergency Management in Hawaii, and it is being presented by the Hawaii Emergency Management Agency, also known as HAIMA. The presenters will introduce a federated emergency management framework that's designed to enhance coordination, efficiency, and resilience in Hawaii's disaster management system. This model aims to link state, county, private, nonprofit, and academic partners under a unified yet decentralized approach. I just wanted to go through a few quick housekeeping notes before I begin. The session is being recorded, just a heads up. We're also going to reserve the last 10 minutes for a Q&A session, so please feel free to submit your questions or comments in the Zoom chat at any time. And if we're unable to get to all of those questions, then don't worry, they will be forwarded to our presenters and they will be answered in a follow-up email that you should be receiving within the next week, along with a link to the session recording. So without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce our speakers for today. James Barros is the administrator of the Hawaii Emergency Management Agency, where he leads the state's emergency preparedness, response, and recovery efforts. And we also have John Vieira, who is the community outreach lead for HAIMA, and he is focused on strengthening community relationships and advancing resilience initiatives statewide. Thank you both for being here today, and now I'll just turn it over to you folks.
All right. Thank you for the invitation. When I retired from the military about 4 years ago, I was taking a lot of NDPTC courses online. And then I got this job, and I guess my online training went down. And I'm not real familiar even presenting on Zoom. So John's teaching me that piece. So I'm excited to share kind of our vision that we have in Haima with federating emergency management. John, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so hello everyone, and likewise, mahalo for the invite. Really excited about this opportunity. This is sort of a work in progress since my position was created by Administrator Barros as the community outreach lead. And through his leadership over the past 2 years, we've been able to actually build a team. And so now there's a team of 6 here at Haima that are dedicated to community outreach, right? And that really is closing the gaps, building bridges, whatever you want to call it, in connecting external partners from the agency. And so for the past 2 years, we've been just meeting community leaders like yourselves, and all those who are interested in what federating emergency management in Hawaii looks like through building of community resilience. And so appreciate being here. And yeah, look forward to today's presentation and quick Q&A at the end. Administrator?
Yeah. John, you can go ahead and share the slides. Yeah,
Yep,
so
yeah.
yeah, emergency management. Going on starting my third year at Haima. And like John said, John was one of my first hires as the administrator as we looked at how do we move emergency management into the future. So Check out next, John. And we're talking about this federating emergency management, expanding the aperture from what we understand and how we do business. And it's about I bold that word up there, unified. In the military, we talk unified command. I mean, emergency management, we're talking about unified effort. This everybody moving in the same direction, everybody understanding uh, the same challenges, but coming at the problem set from a different angle and providing a solution that's unique to their niche. But it's about, one of the things we always say too, it's a Kako thing, right? It's a shared responsibility. The Kako belongs to all of us. Check out next slide, John. Often we look at emergency management and go, hey, that's FEMA. When we talk response recovery, hey, that's FEMA. Yeah, that's a FEMA job. Oh, emergency management in a state. Oh, that's HANIMA, Department of Defense, National Guard. And then we're really linked with our partners in the counties because they have their emergency management departments. So a lot of times what we hear from the citizens is that emergency management is our job as a government. We have our role to play, and we have an obligation to serve the citizens. But what we're trying to do is change that vocabulary so that it's a Kako thing, that we owe it to each other as a state. I like to share this slide because just the efforts of all the state departments. Anytime there's an emergency, uh, and back in August of 23, every one of our state departments stepped up and provided, from their unique perspective, solution sets to problems. And I think over the past 2 years, we've really strengthened um, the state's connectivity as a government. So I was very pleased on Father's Day when Maui fire occurred. Maui County and their fire department stood up. We got DOFA from DLNR. They became involved. The National Guard uh, up their posture. We went even with Hawaiian Homelands because that was the properties. So everybody starts to kind of posture up when we see something happening, or they understand that there's an incident. So I'm very, very comfortable. I'm very pleased with where the state's progress and where we're going on the government side. On the federal government side, everybody, we're all tracking the uncertainties, but I am very optimistic that as we get into this hurricane season, that we're going into this season with the FEMA that we understand, with the FEMA that we know, from our partnerships with Region 9. I'm very comfortable and confident that the FEMA support we'll get this hurricane season is in place. Next hurricane season, that'll be something that we'll have to have that conversation. So as we hear from the federal government saying, hey, the states got to take a better a role in emergency management. It's got to be more on them and less on FEMA. So we participate in those conversations. But I think with John and our movement into this federating, saying, we're all part of it. We're all part of the solution. John, check out next slide. Because that's the for us, that's the center of gravity that I always turn to John and I say, hey, my center of gravity is how strong our communities are. Uh, the strength of our communities, and we've been focused on preparedness and limited response. I'm telling John, open the aperture. They need a more robust response posture, and then when we move into the recovery piece, they need to be more robust. But from my perspective as the administrator, the center of gravity for the state is the community. That's at the very core of it, and that's what we've been focused on for the past 26 months. John, trickle to the next one, please. So this is one of my favorite slides that I always like to share, and I actually stole the slide from a presentation that I saw somewhere else, and I came back and I just told Trey, it just put our Haima seal in the middle, and boom, he did it. Is oh, okay, that's a Haima slide now. But I mentioned earlier, we really look at the communities and we try to pump the preparedness, and they're working the expanding the response capabilities. Uh, I want to really be able to leverage them in our recovery and mitigation phases, so that when we go in for a mitigation project, it's bottom up and it's really coming from the communities that through John's programs, through our Firewise, the community themselves are doing a very good threat assessment of the hazards of their particular community, and then working with our team, working with some of the academic in fields. I will show another slide of where we want to leverage some of the academic stuff, but looking and going, so what are some mitigation projects that the communities can use and in place? So John, trickle to the next one. So when we started with John, again, being the one of the first employees that I hire, because again, this is at the very core of how strong we are as a state. I can have the best state emergency management agency, have everybody certified and validated. But if our communities aren't ready, if our communities aren't strong and they're not ready, uh, then we're going to fail as a state. So that's why I put so much effort into John's programs. So John will explain his programs a little bit. Go ahead, John.
Thank you, Administrator. So, when I came on board, out of these 7 programs that you see in front of you on this slide, only one existed. And that is the Hawaii Hazards Awareness and Resilience Program. Some of you may know it as HARP, as their acronym is pronounced. And the program was started in 2011. The first certification of a community was in 2013, 14. And so Administrator Barros asked me to take a look at the program and talk to the people, talk to the communities that went through the process that were still a part of a certified HARP. And we kind of took it from there. What I learned in that process is how much listening Haima really needed to do. Um, I realized that a lot of the gaps and lack of connectivity was simply because communities weren't able to share, to talk about their communities. What are their concerns? Haima, we know that across the state, we're looking at the hazards that are going to impact the state as a whole. But through community outreach now, we're saying, hey, let us learn, help us learn, help Haima learn about your community, the hazards that you're concerned about, and then how do we support communities and across the state. And we know that 2/3 of communities out there are, susceptible and vulnerable to tsunamis being on the coastlines, right? We also know that hurricanes, based on some of our building codes of the past and where our structures are physically. there needs hardening, there needs support, there needs mitigation efforts. So with all of that, we also continue to look beyond who else are the other partners. And so here's where now you see these other programs that we stood up really from the ground. So starting with our P3 or public-private partners, this type of partnership isn't new to emergency management. There's across the nation, and really across the world, there are organizations, there have been efforts to build this connectivity with private partners and businesses. And so we started that process. We've started our private partner forums, and we had to listen to see, okay, what are some of the challenges from the past, and how do we get past these challenges and move forward into the future. And through those public partnerships now, we said, okay, as we identify the critical industries and sectors, now how do we bring them together, right? And this is now where you see we recently stood up through our trainings, our Business Emergency Operations Center, or BEOC. Um, and what that is we're looking at our critical partners in the different industries in preparation for planning for a response, initial response, and then moving into recovery. And so, through our last week's exercise, Makani Pahili, we brought the core partners together. And so we're in that process of identifying who's our core partners that can represent the different sectors. Now, we're doing these things at the state level. But then this will be something that we work with the counties as well on to see, what that looks like at a jurisdictional level and at the county level. And then moving over, you see Volunteer and Donations Management Task Force, where we've taken what we've learned from Lahaina, um, the good that came out of community, and some of the realities that we saw, and some of the real challenges, duplication of effort, making sure we're efficient, and manage donations, and donors' intent, right? We want to make sure that every donation that we get, whether it be a supply or monetary, we honor the donor's intent and making sure that these donations are getting to the people and the communities that need it. And another program we have is our Tsunami Ambassador Program. Again, the threat of tsunami across the state. We're working with the DOE schools and the private schools to identify middle schoolers, and how we raise awareness and create a tsunami awareness experience, taking a cohort of students to the Pacific Tsunami Museum, give them a little bit of the history, and then going back into their communities, really around the schools that these middle schoolers attend, and look at what tsunami hazards look like, and how communities can better prepare in creating these middle school ambassadors that can help now to come at us to events to, you know, raise awareness with the elementary age students as well as high school students, and then into the communities as a whole, as we know a lot of initiatives that we work with, you know, school age kids can really influence parents, grandparents, and kupuna in the community. So that's something else we're working on. We recently identified our state CERT coordinator. There's a lot of great things happening with CERT programs at the counties, in the communities. We're just looking to facilitate it. What does that look like across the state? How do we support the facilitation, possible trainings, and how do we kind of, again, bridge some of those gaps and look at all the good things that CERT is doing across the state. The CERT programs also, fall under our community resilience sort of approach, where we're not saying that our HR program is the one be all in the community, but it is sort of the state version and certification that we look at, which could include, your Be Ready nonprofits, your CERT programs, all encompassing the whole community. And so that's what the state coordinator is doing. And then finally, one of our key programs that we're really excited about is the relationship we've built with the University of Hawaii Community College System, in identifying education and training opportunities, and really, training in identifying educational pathways to workforce development into the future as a part of this federating emergency management across the state of Hawaii. And so, looking at what the function is with the community college. We're also looking at the 4 years. We're looking at some of the other training centers like, NDPTC, and how all this really looks, and mapping it all out, and then really identifying how we can integrate and strengthen our connectivity. So that's sort of an overview of these programs. I'm definitely open to feedback and questions through email, once we're done with this presentation, as well as Q&A at the end. But really excited about the things we're doing. It's a heavy lift, but under Administrator Barros's guidance and leadership, this is something that is new to Haima, and we're really excited about it here at Outreach. Administrator?
Yeah, if you go to the next slide. So as I mentioned earlier, right, the community is at the center of our efforts and strengthening our communities. So the program of record we have at the state is the program that John's working on, and it's the HARP. Which he's doing a rewrite. He'll talk about it a little bit more in this presentation. But that's at the what we want to strengthen. That's the focus, is strengthening the communities. No, it doesn't have to be an HARP. It doesn't have to be a CERT. It can be whatever the community decides that that's what they want. We just, from Haima's perspective, I just need them to be better prepared. I need them to know on how to respond within their neighborhood and their capabilities, and then leverage them during the recovery, perhaps damage assessment, perhaps assisting with a survivor center. You know, that's just some of the things in the recovery side. And then, like I mentioned, the mitigation, bottom up mitigation throughout the state. And when we talk with the community colleges, even though our conversation with the state librarian and, how they see themselves as really part of the community. And when you talk to the community college chancellors, they are part of those communities that they're in. So we started our conversation with Leeward because what we're trying to get after is I want to elevate the education level of our emergency managers in that first slide that I showed. The state partners, our EMOs, our emergency management officers throughout the state, our county partners and our county folks, and provide that opportunity to advance our academic pathways. So we opened the conversations with Leeward and with some other programs that we find across the United States. Prior to the current federal administration, we had some great conversations with FEMA EMI, and our conversation was that with Haima at the community college, we become a FEMA EMI anywhere. What I told them was, no, let's make it a FEMA EMI Pacific, and we would build that out at our community college or somewhere at one of our community colleges. But the other aspect of partnering with the community colleges, providing that educational piece of emergency management, is focused on training the volunteers in the community, focused on getting that HARP, that vibrant Hawai'i, right? That Waimanalo community. So we're all talking the same language when we're talking emergency management, where we all have that same understanding, that baseline understanding, and through that education, those other pieces we pull in. Our private partners. John will talk about our P3s, our nonprofits, the community base, and that builds our network, both with an academic approach that we're looking at, and then through and what I told John is I want to pull all of these pieces into our overall exercise so that we're practicing, so that the HARP doesn't go through a validation and then that's it, wait for something to happen. No, we bring them into our Makani Pahili, bring them into our monthly drills, our tsunami exercise can be as large as they want or as small as they want. But we draw them in so that every aspect of our emergency management is part of this response. So again, I mean, I cannot stress that enough across every opportunity I have to speak is the center of gravity is our communities and strengthening those communities. So, John, you want to go to the next one to kind of talk a little bit more about the couple programs you have?
Yeah, so let's dive a little bit into the P3 or public-private partners. And our P3 program and how we're designing it, it's really a come one, come all. We're working with the Hawaii Chamber of Commerce, sort of to initiate and identify what the business but the business landscape looks like, some of the industries and the sectors across the state, so that we can start building that connectivity. So when we talk about P3, what this is basically a come one, come all for all businesses to register through a portal we're going to stand up so that we can understand what businesses are out there and some basic information on do they have a point of contact or an emergency um, manager or officer, a safety officer, safety manager. What is it that the businesses have? And why we want to do this is that we know that businesses on a day-to-day basis within their communities, whether it's the community that the business is in or the communities they service, they are really the experts of the day-to-day function, coming from the private sector. And they're working with the communities, and so we want to understand that, right? Also, we want to provide opportunities to support building business resilience. And you folks are well aware out there that there's a lot of guidelines, or there are FEMA guidelines on building business resilience. And so we're not reinventing the wheels here. We are just, first of all, building our map of connectivity. Coming into this position, it is what it is that I didn't have a handover of our current, list of relationships that we already have with partners. So we had to start from the bottom up. And the first thing is, again, identification. And then the map of connectivity, right? And then really, once identifying the map of connectivity, what are the communication cascades? Definitely what we learned from Lahaina is I made way too many phone calls to identify solution sets or resources along with the ESFs, across the EOC and just the efficiency, lack of efficiency. So with this, it's now identifying who's connected, what does that map of connectivity look like, and what are the communication cascades so that we can now just identify and call directly the point of contacts that we see appropriate for fulfilling any request for assistance coming out of the counties. And so really, with that, we're also supporting plan collaborating on planning, but then really it's how do we make sure that we bounce back quickly, right, in recovery? And so again, as administrator keeps stating mitigation, mitigation, and how do we put this all together? So what we initially did through our private partner forums is, for example, we brought our feeding partners together, right? And this slide just kind of shows some of the private sector companies, as well as then the nonprofits that are out there and NGOs that we know are supplying feeding partners. Now, this for us, our initial public-private forum was in 2024. And what we needed to do was first again get a picture of the landscape. So we're building on this. This isn't in any way a final roster of who we're working with. We're still in the progress of identifying companies that are out there. And some of you on this call, I would love to hear from you on your thoughts on who else is out there, what other companies are out there critical to feeding, as well as the other sectors that we're working across. And so, some of these partners have already connected through the counties and at the state level. And so we're not, again, reinventing the wheel here, right? If we understand the connectivity already with the counties or particularly emergency management at the county level, then we know how then to just support when needed. But in many cases, what we're finding is that there are a lot of partners out there that really don't have a channel of communication. And so we just want to start at least building those channels of communication. And so with that, we're looking at this general partner roster, and then we're looking at our business emergency operations center and what that looks like now, right? Who are the critical partners and liaisons that we need in an actual operations center? Our BEOC is attached to our state EOC, and as you folks may know, that the state EOC, is really there to service then the county level EOCs and all the RFAs or requests for assistance and RFIs, requests for information that come out of the county to the state. What we're saying is now at this, when we get a RFA, RFI, and we're looking at it with our state assets and we say, hey, we don't have a solution set, or we don't have the resources, what we're saying now is, hey, we're going to now take this request and throw it out to the business EOC. And so our partners now kick into action and coordinate amongst, again, these partnerships, um, these companies that under blue skies in normal operations, they already work together, right? They already know what each other does. And so we bring that all together at the BOC. And so, it's convening, planning, communicating, coordinating, decision making, right? Which is key. And really to make sure all that is fluid, we provide training and exercise, right? As the administrator shared, during Makani Pahili, we activated the BEOC as well, and we went through that process of training up in a scrimmage or a controlled scrimmage, so to speak, what that looks like with our partners. How do we facilitate this collaboration? And so there's definitely been a lot of interest with this because we've identified a lot of private partners really feel handcuffed, knowing that they can offer so much in what they already do, and they just need that conduit of connectivity. And so, with that, with our private partners, our our education and training, all of this, right, is really to support building whole communities, right? And what that looks like under our HR program. So Hawaii Hazards Awareness and Resilience Program, we rebranded it, in 2023 as HARP. So it's the same acronym. It's just pronounced differently in our revamp, right? We're calling it HARP versus what it was known as HARP. And so within that, you know, really the goal, right, is to enhance community resilience. And we know there's a ton of well, we learned, we didn't know initially until we did some research and started making some calls and doing some presentations that there's a lot of good things going on in the building of community resilience. There's these resilient hubs. There are these different programs and organizations that I think we all are familiar with, that are either doing research, gathering information, bringing together communities to share, data and information. We have communities and organizations that are actually running resilient hubs or sustainability hubs, really focused on daily operations or daily functions. And then they're implementing now the emergency planning and response and recovery phase to that. So there's a lot of really good things going on. We're trying to bring that all together. So when we talk about our HR, it really is that whole community, right? To promote, first of all, hazard awareness, and then the fundamental, you know, education and training that's needed for the whole community, meaning um, taking into account that not everyone in a community is going to be a responder in the sense of, where CERT now you get certified in CERT. CERT does great trainings to prepare, the team to be able to respond. Maybe it's some, first aid, maybe to be sawyers or be able to kind of removal debris, debris removal, and things like that. But we also know in that same community, we at least want to make sure that every individual and families are prepared to take care of themselves, right? And so the scope of our HR program and the action plan that we build or we support the facilitation and development of with the community is based around 14 days. We're talking about 2 weeks already, right? You hear this kind of all over the place in our messaging. And again, this is not a state-only initiative, right? This is a state and county. When you look at the administration guide for the program, you'll see that it's state and county initiative. And so this is what we're building with the counties and within the communities and refining what that looks like. So this is not something that the state or Haima is doing independently. We're sharing information with the county emergency managers on who we're talking to, what's going on in those conversations, and how can we work together to be a part of the building and development of these HARPs. And so real quickly, just what does that look like, right? What does this HR program look like? It's based on 6 modules. And one is just getting started. In the getting started, what we're looking for, right, is we're looking for community leaders. What we're doing is we're training community leaders. We're not going directly into a community and doing presentations of these modules to the general community. What we're saying is in module 1, we're going to get you started. We're going to explain the program to to the point of contact of a community. That point of contact now looks and identifies leaders in their community and shares with us, hey, what are the needs? What are they looking at? And so we'll share the program at that point with the facilitators or community leaders. And then we go to the process of explaining the program, the presentations, the resources that we have, and the deliverables and outcomes that we're looking for. And so once that's going in module 2 now, the community gets together just to talk about the hazards of that community, right? And just basic hazard awareness and some of the history of the hazards that have or incidents that have taken place in the community. Yeah. And this is a come on to come all for the community. Again, the community leader is doing the presentation. We're there now just for support to help move the discussion along, making sure we're keeping an eye on the milestones and sort of the key objectives. And when you go into module 3, this is where personal preparedness, we have a workbook that we created, um, through our information and assets working group here at Haima that then reaches out to the county and the communities and say, hey, what do you need? What does a workbook look like? Reaching out to our partners, what does a personal preparedness workbook look like? So this is where now, hey, we want as many members of the community to complete a workbook, and you folks will see that it's just a general, information on personal preparedness, and some of the things that we are all talking about out in public messaging. And then we go to module 4, risk assessment. This is where we really now collaborate with the county, emergency managers and planners and say, okay, we want Haima will help facilitate this coordination to go through this risk assessment. But ultimately, this risk assessment is something that the community and the county level emergency managers and planners have eyes on and can collaborate together. And then coming up in module 5 with an actual community emergency action plan. And again, that's with the collaboration of the county. And the county really is we're working with the counties to identify, okay, who is that, right, from the county, at the county level to really have eyes on modules 4 and 5, and moving forward in developing an action plan. And then finally, module 6. This is where we want to sustain the program, and this is where where we talk about now how do we engage the community in future trainings beyond certification, workshops, and exercises. Yeah, and this is something that we can integrate communities into our state level exercises, or if the community has already exercises that they're participating with the county or at the county level, then we can just find ways to support that as needed and as appropriate as well. Okay, so a lot of information, kind of cross outreach. Definitely open to your folks' feedback. And I know a lot of people on this call right now, as I look at the list, there's a lot of you that have a lot of experience in this, right? And so again, we're not here to reinvent the wheel. The HR program, as stated in the administration guide, is a base. It is not in concrete or in stone, right? And so we are constantly looking at how do we improve, and how do we make sure it's encompassing for the whole community, while at the same time getting the awareness out there and the training out there that we feel is needed out in the communities. So, okay, I'll leave it at that, Administrator. Administrator, your mute is on.
Okay, one more slide. Yeah, so just sharing our program and kind of our vision of moving our communities to be better prepared and ready to respond uh, in a recovery phase. And then, John touched the mitigation piece. I mean, you guys are all aware that we do a state hazard mitigation plan, and I cover the entire state. The counties work on theirs. So now the HARPs, that piece, that module now drills down to very specific. And all of our talking points to our residents when we get into fire season, fire wise is, hey, take a look at your property. So we want them to start there and then take a look at their neighborhood and all of that feeding up into our state hazard mitigation plan and how do we mitigate the threats that and hazards that are out there. So that was part of it. John mentioned resilience hubs. So he knows for me that's a bad word. Haima, we're not gonna develop resilient hubs. We're gonna really look and push to develop readiness centers for these communities that stand up, that go through the HARP, that it's valid state program. We're pushing that. John does the people piece. That's the HARP and the modules he just spoke about. He draws in, our nonprofits and our NGOs and our community-based folks into that network within that community. And the Community Readiness Center is actually a physical building that the community has. So that's kind of where we're working towards. We got one bill this past session. The bill got all the way to House Fin and then it died. But we're gonna re-engage the legislators again. We're looking at some innovative, I think, funding solutions so that we can actually build what I told the legislators this year. The the Readiness Center will look and smell like a resiliency hub, but it's not a resiliency hub. It's a readiness center focused on um, the messaging, focusing on the readiness and the preparedness of the community. Um, Next slide, John. I think that's about all we have. So we're open for questions.
Sounds good. Thank you so much, you folks. Yeah, I guess we can open it up to a Q&A session right now. Go through the comments. I guess the first one that maybe we can answer is from Jimmy. He says, how do these state outreach programs mirror and supplement what the counties do?
Yeah. John has an open dialogue with the counties. So right now, Maui County just hired their community folks. As we're looking specifically, let's just specifically for Maui, he's looking at Amos is looking at on Lanai and Molokai identifying the key leaders that John spoke about and building that HARP around them. So John has constant communication with leadership throughout the state, community leaders, and then we share that with the counties.
Yeah, and just a little more to that too is just simply um, relationships, right? Everything we're doing is being transparent, and there's two parts to that, right? Is some communities have experience with HARP, right, from the past, and so we're re sort of as we go through a revamp, we're explaining some of the differences, and what really the main difference is now is that there's a team at Haima. Right, of us, there's six of us that our job is community outreach, and HARP is that priority program. And what that allows us to do is, we attend, last year we attended 40 plus community events. That's just preparedness events. That's not counting the pitching and the presenting and the discussions on Zoom that we have, right? So as we bring all of this, connectivity together, we're sharing that. We want this to be driven by the county. So, for example, with Maui, right, there wasn't a um, on Molokai and Lanai, there was no harp, right? So now we're saying, hey, working with Chief Amos is, you know, what do you want, Chief? What does that look like to you? And how do we support building the HRP truly now from the community, county level to the state? Yeah. And so I think a lot of the questions that people have in their mind is there may have some history of harp and in the past. The modules, the program is still a great program. It's we're changing and revamping the execution of the program to be able to be more transparent, to be more communicative, because we have the team that we have.
Awesome. Thank you so much for answering that. The next person, it seems, Karen, if you want to go ahead and unmute.
Okay. Aloha, Wei-san. Thank you so much for your presentation from Haima. My question is, how do you see the role of residents following the disaster and the period where government and NGOs arrive? As with the Maui wildfire, we had some residents that may have felt pushed out or not acknowledged for their efforts immediately. And during the disaster, when these organizations had yet to arrive. So, how do you see the role of residents if there's a transition? Is it bottom up, or does government come in? And I'm just trying to get a better grasp, because what you're sharing now is very insightful, and I'm looking forward to see how you're envisioning how government and residents, how the transition takes place. I hope I explained myself enough.
Yes. No, because I don't think there is a transition. In my mind, there is no transition. We don't come. Say FEMA comes in, they don't take over. They should be augmenting what the county and state government is already doing. And same like if the state comes in, we don't take over Maui County. We augment them. So ideally, in my ideal world, is John went to that community. We have a solid, we know who the leaders are. There's a solid team because now that entire community, we identify them as survivors and not victims, right? The victim, they don't know what to do. They're just waiting for help. But like you said, there were survivors that stood up and started working. But now, if we can identify that and have that pre-plan that we know what this neighbor is doing and we know what this neighbor is doing. Now, when the county government, when the state government comes in, all we're doing is augmenting, supporting, and amplifying what the community is already doing. So I don't see really I wouldn't call it a transition. I would see more of a surge of resources and capability to support that community. Does,
Mhm.
does that make sense?
Yes, very, very much so. Thank you so much, because I worked at the Red Cross shelter, and I'm also I been through that program and done a lot of disaster preparedness initiatives. So I'm glad to hear that, because and I just hope that the federal government, that from the state, from your end, that's communicated to the federal level, because I think residents felt a little pushed a little to.
Yeah, they came in really hard, but they learned fast. They ran ahead of us at the state and the county, uh, and then we had to kind of rein them back. But I think culturally, they recognize that early on.
Mhm. Thank you so
Think,
Yeah,
much.
yeah,
Karen, to add to that, piggybacking on the administrator's response, it's a really good question because when we look at what HARP is, it mitigates it through planning, right? To raising awareness to the community to understand how government works, right? And then working together to come up with a community plan, right? This is where now we can share information and not make assumptions. And a lot of what happened with FEMA, as FEMA came in, was I couldn't present a community plan to say, hey, here's what the community is doing. Here's where they're at, right, in the response. So let's take a look at this first before you go barging in to the community and thinking that we have all the answers, right? Because communities don't need permission to respond for their own individual survival for sure. And then there's no need for permission to start, coordinating already before first responders can get there and before government can get there.
Definitely. Thank you. Excellent.
Awesome. Thank you for that question. Also, just a quick heads up, a lot of people are releasing some really good info in the chat. So if this is a perfect networking opportunity for you folks, I really encourage you folks to check out the chat. Does anybody have any more questions? Floor is open right now.
Actually, if I may, hi, Jason. Liz Fisher, University of Hawaii Extension Services. I also sit with the state ESF6 mass care team, and we have a lot of lessons that came out from that on products and language for the community, using local translators for the local dialects. This is a lesson purely from Maui. I know that State Ledge put forth an piece of law that I believe was enacted. So, James, to you, what is the status of hiring a person on HAIMA's team working with limited English proficiency and providing resources in the multiple languages that are here in Hawaii? Mahalo.
And Liz, as soon as we got the bill was passed, we hired somebody. So somebody's been on board for almost a year now, working on exactly what we're talking about, the English, limited English proficiency. So they've identified a lot of the top languages. So I have somebody working full time at Haima to address this specific issue. And then during Makani Pahili, as we went through the exercise, I had conversations with him on how do I best use him when we're activated for an event. So yeah, we've been working it for a few months now.
Oh, that's great. On behalf of ESF6, I would love to offer some of the resources so that he doesn't have to recreate, because that's where we all get to success better, is more efficient and effective use of our time. And I'll talk with you offline about getting connected with him. So thank you. Really excited for you guys. This is fantastic.
Thanks.
Seems like we got one more in from Jimmy. How does the state CAT team objectives and actions coordinate with these efforts and initiatives?
Yeah, say again the question. Sorry, I didn't get the question.
Oh, no
Sorry.
worries. Let me repeat. From Jimmy, how does the state CAT team objectives and actions coordinate with these efforts and initiatives?
Yeah, as a new administrator, like I spoke of earlier, looking at our vulnerabilities and assessing that, where we need to put our efforts. And right now, it's in John's programs, and it's in federating, our emergency management, so that those individuals, like the librarians, they wanna be part of the solution set, but where can they fit? So as we develop it, like any plan changes. Any of my response plans, it doesn't survive contact. However, what will survive contact is strong, resilient, ready communities. And that's really the center of gravity for me. I can't say it enough. That's where we're focusing our efforts.
Awesome. Thank you for that. It seems like we only have 5 more minutes left. Maybe another quick question if anybody has anything that they want to.
There was one in the chat. Ted is asking, is Haima considering or working on EMAP accreditation? Liz sort of answered it, but I just wanted to give you folks an opportunity to answer or update.
Yeah. So in 2023, so Haima, before I got there, Haima went through the process. I think we had about 7 deficiencies. So in 2023, early in 2023, they provided us with shoots, what did they call it? They said, yeah, we're going to credit you, but you have to address these 7 shortcomings. So our plan was to address it in 2023. Unfortunately, things happened. I pushed that to the side. I said, that's absolutely irrelevant to us right now. We're not going to even deal with it. And it's been since August, it's Haima's been on a very running pattern. We've been at a sprint. So we finally, pulled people off that they can start to walk again. But there's some pieces of the agency that are still running. But I did engage the EMAP folks and say, hey, at NEMA, I approached them and said, this is where we are, and I would like to have a conversation with them. So I asked them if they would be willing to pick up our accreditation of exactly where we left off in 23 and just let us address those 7. They came back with there's new requirements. So they updated the EMAP. So we would have to address the 7 shortcomings we had, and then I think another 5 new requirements. So we asked them, that committee has it, and we asked them to consider that. So that's where we are with EMAP.
Excellent, thank you. I don't see a follow-up question for that while you were talking, so I think we're good on that one.
Thanks for
Just
catching. Yeah.
No worries. In case you didn't see it in the chat, Chen Chen from Oklahoma State University is offering to share some of the Lahaina data that they collected, and we'll get you folks their contact information after we finish today.
Hey, Lydia,
Okay.
real quick, can I add that in the chat? I added a link to our HARP GIS map, right? So you folks can just kind of take a look at who we're talking to and where we're at across the state currently.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. Well, with all of that being said, I think right now would be a good time to bring our webinar to a close. So mahalo again to James and John for sharing their time and their expertise. And thank you everyone for joining us today. You will be receiving a follow-up email within the next week that includes a link to today's recording and responses to any questions, that you folks might have afterwards. Feel free to send them to us. Before I let you folks go, I'm going to go ahead and drop some links into the chat. The first link should be a link to our last month's recording of our third Thursday. If you folks want to go ahead and look at that, and it also is a playlist of all of our previous recordings as well. And then the second link is going to be for our upcoming NDPTC training event, which is happening from the 18th to the 22nd at the Hawaii Convention Center in Honolulu, excuse me. And we'll be offering 11 different courses as part of a 5-day round robin training event. So if you folks could make it, we'd love to have you there. More networking as well. But other than that, that's pretty much it. Thank you very much for attending, and we hope to see you guys at the next one. Mahalo.
Right. Hello.
Aloha.
Aloha.
Aloha, thank you.